Exodus chapter 6. Promises of deliverance. Then the Lord told Moses,
Now you will see what I will do to Pharaoh. When he feels the force of my strong hand, he will let the people go. In fact, he will force them to leave his land.
And God said to Moses,
I am Yahweh, the Lord. I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob as El Shaddai, God Almighty. But I did not reveal my name, Yahweh, to them. And I reaffirmed my covenant with them. Under its terms, I promised to give them the land of Canaan, where they were living as foreigners. You can be sure that I have heard the groans of the people of Israel, who are now slaves to the Egyptians, and I am well aware of my covenant with them. Therefore, say to the people of Israel, I am the Lord. I will free you from your oppression and will rescue you from your slavery in Egypt. I will redeem you with a powerful arm and great acts of judgment. I will claim you as my own people, and I will be your God. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God, who has freed you from your oppression in Egypt. I will bring you into the land I swore to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I will give it to you as your very own possession. I am the Lord.
So Moses told the people of Israel what the Lord had said, but they refused to listen anymore. They had become too discouraged by the brutality of their slavery. Then the Lord said to Moses,
Go back to Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and tell him to let the people of Israel leave his country.
But Lord,
Moses objected,
my own people won't listen to me anymore. How can I expect Pharaoh to listen? I'm such a clumsy speaker.
The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron and gave them orders for the Israelites and for Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. The Lord commanded Moses and Aaron to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt. The ancestors of Moses and Aaron. These are the ancestors of some of the clans of Israel. The sons of Reuben, Israel's oldest son, were Hanok, Palu, Hezron, and Carmi. Their descendants became the clans of Reuben. The sons of Simeon were Jemuel, Jamin, Ohad, Jachin, Zohar, and Shaul. Shaul's mother was a Canaanite woman. Their descendants became the clans of Simeon. These are the descendants of Levi, as listed in their family records. The sons of Levi were Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. Levi lived to be 137 years old. The descendants of Gershon included Libni, Shimei, each of whom became the ancestors of a clan. The descendants of Kohath included Amram, Ishar, Hebron, and Uzziel. Kohath lived to be 133 years old. The descendants of Merari included Mali and Mushai. These are the clans of the Levites, as listed in their family records. Amram married his father's sister, Jochebed, and she gave birth to his sons, Aaron and Moses. Amram lived to be 137 years old. The sons of Ishar were Korah, Nepheg, and Zikri. The sons of Uzziel were Mishael, Elsaphan, and Sithri. Aaron married Elisheba, the daughter of Aminadab, and sister of Nahshon, and she gave birth to his sons, Nadab, Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar. The sons of Korah were Asir, Elkanah, and Abiasaph. Their descendants became the clans of Korah. Eleazar, son of Aaron, married one of the daughters of Putiel, and she gave birth to his son, Phinehas. These are the ancestors of the Levite families, listed according to their clans. The Aaron and Moses named in this list are the same ones to whom the Lord said,
Lead the people of Israel out of the land of Egypt like an army.
It was Moses and Aaron who spoke to Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, about leading the people of Israel out of Egypt. When the Lord spoke to Moses in the land of Egypt, he said to him,
I am the Lord. Tell Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, everything I am telling you.
But Moses argued with the Lord, saying,
I can't do it. I'm such a clumsy speaker. Why should Pharaoh listen to me?
The story of the Bible begins in a garden temple with a couple, Adam and Eve, as God's royal priests.
They're supposed to partner with God to take care of creation, and this place where heaven and earth are one is filled with God's blessing.
But Adam and Eve were led astray by a deceptive creature and exiled from God's presence. Their vocation as priests is lost. And with that, all humanity descends into violence. But God promises that a new royal priest will come to lead them back into the blessing of Eden by sacrificing himself.
So later on, we meet a new couple, Abraham and Sarah. God promises that through their family, the royal priest will come to restore the Eden blessing, not just for them, but for all the nations. And so it's this family that grows to become the Israelites. And they eventually journey to Egypt and then become enslaved under the violent rule of King Pharaoh.
So, God appoints a man named Moses to represent him to Pharaoh and to mediate on Israel's behalf.
Moses confronts Pharaoh and then leads Israel out of slavery and into the wilderness, where they eventually come to Mount Sinai. And here, God appears to all the Israelites, inviting them to become a kingdom of priests.
So he's inviting everyone to be priests, like Adam and Eve were priests in Eden.
Right. But it turns out the people are afraid of God, and they don't want to come close to God's presence, and so Moses goes alone up to the top of the mountain.
And up there, Moses famously gets the 10 Commandments, the first two being, worship Yahweh alone, and don't make idol statues.
And Moses sees some really amazing things up there. First, he sees God's heavenly temple, and then also a blueprint of it called the pattern.
All right, the plans for the construction of the tabernacle.
Yeah, it's designed as a symbolic model of Eden, a place where heaven and earth are one. Then Moses sees something else, the pattern of a glorious human figure.
The high priest who will work in the tabernacle.
Right, and only this priest can go in and out of the sacred space on behalf of others. He's dressed in white, he wears a crown and is glowing with jewels. He's an image of the royal priest that we're waiting for.
And yet, the man who's called to be Israel's first high priest is the brother of Moses, a man named Aaron.
And while Moses is up seeing all of this, down at the foot of the mountain, Aaron is misleading the people by making an idol statue of God.
So the soon-to-be high priest is breaking the first of the 10 Commandments.
Yes. And so God gets angry and he tells Moses that he's done with these people. He'll just start over with Moses. But Moses stands before God and he intercedes for the Israelites. He even offers his own life as a sacrifice for their sins.
And while God doesn't take Moses' life, he does forgive the people like Moses asked.
And so when Moses comes down from the mountain, he's shining, just like the high priest that he saw in his vision. It's like he's the real priest that his brother was supposed to be, but failed.
And from here, the tabernacle is built.
And then Aaron's family is installed to the priesthood.
But really, even after this bad start?
Yeah, and actually things get even worse. God gives Aaron and his sons really precise instructions on how to act as the priests. And then on their first day on the job, Aaron's two sons violate God's commands. And because they're in a place of great privilege and responsibility, God deals severely.
They die inside the tabernacle. Things are not looking good for the priesthood of Aaron.
Right, both Aaron and his sons have failed in their priestly role, and this begins to make us think maybe God's people need a different kind of priesthood.
Maybe one that's more like Moses, who surrendered his very life over to God.
Yes, and while Moses is great, he also fails to be fully obedient to God. And so both he and Aaron die outside the land promised to Abraham.
So Moses was only an image of the kind of priest that God's people will need.
Right, we're still waiting for this ultimate royal priest who will intercede like Moses and offer his life for the failures of others.
The Israelites eventually make it into the promised land, and there they appoint a king and establish a kingdom. Perhaps now God's royal priest can arrive.
Then this brings us to King David, and his story is what we're going to look at next.
Matthew chapter 27. Judas hangs himself. Very early in the morning, the leading priests and the elders of the people met again to lay plans for putting Jesus to death. Then they bound him, led him away, and took him to Pilate, the Roman governor. When Judas, who had betrayed him, realized that Jesus had been condemned to die, he was filled with remorse. So he took the 30 pieces of silver back to the leading priests and the elders.
I have sinned,
He declared.
for I have betrayed an innocent man. What do we care?
They retorted.
That's your problem.
Then Judas threw the silver coins down in the temple and went out and hanged himself. The leading priests picked up the coins.
It wouldn't be right to put this money in the temple treasury,
They said.
since it was payment for murder.
After some discussion, they finally decided to buy the potter's field, and they made it into a cemetery for foreigners. That is why the field is still called the Field of Blood. This fulfilled the prophecy of Jeremiah that says, "They took the 30 pieces of silver, the price at which he was valued by the people of Israel, and purchased the potter's field as the Lord directed." Jesus' trial before Pilate. Now Jesus was standing before Pilate, the Roman governor.
Are you the king of the Jews?
The governor asked him. Jesus replied,
You have said it.
but when the leading priests and the elders made their accusations against him, Jesus remained silent.
Don't you hear all these charges they're bringing against you?
Pilate demanded. But Jesus made no response to any of the charges, much to the governor's surprise. Now, it was the governor's custom each year during the Passover celebration to release one prisoner to the crowd, anyone they wanted. This year, there was a notorious prisoner, a man named Barabbas. As the crowds gathered before Pilate's house that morning, he asked them,
Which one do you want me to release to you? Barabbas or Jesus, who is called the Messiah?
He knew very well that the religious leaders had arrested Jesus out of envy. Just then, as Pilate was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent him this message.
Leave that innocent man alone. I suffered through a terrible nightmare about him last night.
Meanwhile, the leading priests and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas to be released and for Jesus to be put to death. So the governor asked again.
Which of these two do you want me to release to you?
The crowd shouted back.
Barabbas.
Pilate responded.
Then what should I do with Jesus, who is called the Messiah?
They shouted back.
Crucify him.
Why?
Pilate demanded.
What crime has he committed?
But the mob roared even louder.
Crucify him.
Pilate saw that he wasn't getting anywhere and that a riot was developing. So he sent for a bowl of water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying,
I am innocent of this man's blood. The responsibility is yours.
And all the people yelled back,
We will take responsibility for his death. We and our children.
So Pilate released Barabbas to them. He ordered Jesus flogged with a lead-tipped whip, then turned him over to the Roman soldiers to be crucified. The soldiers mocked Jesus. Some of the governor's soldiers took Jesus into their headquarters and called out the entire regiment. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him. They wove thorn branches into a crown and put it on his head. And they placed a reed stick in his right hand as a scepter. Then they knelt before him in mockery and taunted.
Hail, King of the Jews.
And they spit on him and grabbed a stick and struck him on the head with it. When they were finally tired of mocking him, they took off the robe and put his own clothes on him again. Then they led him away to be crucified. The crucifixion. Along the way, they came across a man named Simon who was from Cyrene, and the soldiers forced him to carry Jesus' cross. And they went out to a place called Golgotha, which means place of the skull. The soldiers gave him wine mixed with bitter gall, but when he had tasted it, he refused to drink it. After they had nailed him to the cross, the soldiers gambled for his clothes by throwing dice. Then they sat around and kept guard as he hung there. A sign was fastened above Jesus' head, announcing the charge against him. It read, "This is Jesus, King of the Jews." 2 revolutionaries were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. The people passing by shouted abuse, shaking their heads in mockery.
Look at you now.
They yelled at him.
You said you were going to destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days. Well then, if you are the Son of God, save yourself and come down from the cross.
The leading priests, The teachers of religious law and the elders also mocked Jesus.
He saved others,
They scoffed.
but he can't save himself. So he is the king of Israel, is he? Let him come down from the cross right now, and we will believe in him. He trusted God, so let God rescue him now if he wants him. For he said, I am the Son of God.
Even the revolutionaries who were crucified with him ridiculed him in the same way. The death of Jesus. At noon, darkness fell across the whole land until 3 o'clock. At about 3 o'clock, Jesus called out with a loud voice,
Eli, Eli, lima sabachthani,
which means,
my God, why have you abandoned me?
some of the bystanders misunderstood and thought he was calling for the prophet Elijah. One of them ran and filled a sponge with sour wine, holding it up to him on a reed stick so he could drink. But the rest said,
Wait! Let's see whether Elijah comes to save him.
Then Jesus shouted out again, and he released his spirit. At that moment, the curtain in the sanctuary of the temple was torn in two, from top to bottom. The earth shook, rocks split apart, and tombs opened. The bodies of many godly men and women who had died were raised from the dead. They left the cemetery after Jesus' resurrection, went into the holy city of Jerusalem, and appeared to many people. The Roman officer and the other soldiers at the crucifixion were terrified by the earthquake and all that had happened. They said,
This man truly was the Son of God.
and many women who had come from Galilee with Jesus to care for him were watching from a distance. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of James and John, the sons of Zebedee. The burial of Jesus. As evening approached, Joseph, a rich man from Arimathea, who had become a follower of Jesus, went to Pilate and asked for Jesus' body. And Pilate issued an order to release it to him. Joseph took the body and wrapped it in a long sheet of clean linen cloth. He placed it in his own new tomb, which had been carved out of the rock. Then he rolled a great stone across the entrance and left. Both Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were sitting across from the tomb and watching. The guard at the tomb. The next day, on the Sabbath, the leading priests and Pharisees went to see Pilate. They told him,
Sir, we remember what that deceiver once said while he was still alive. After 3 days, I will rise from the dead. So we request that you seal the tomb until the third day. This will prevent his disciples from coming and stealing his body and then telling everyone he was raised from the dead. If that happens, we'll be worse off than we were at first.
Pilate replied,
Take guards and secure it the best you can.
So they sealed the tomb and posted guards to protect it.
When you hear the word witness, you might think of someone who sees something shocking or important and then shares their testimony with others. The word witness is used like this in the Bible too, but here's what's really fascinating. This word actually helps us understand the entire storyline of Scripture. In the Bible, a witness is basically someone who sees something important or amazing. In Hebrew, this person is an aid, and in Greek, a martus. And if this person begins to share what they've seen, we call this bearing witness, in Hebrew, ood, and in Greek, martyreo. So in the story of Ruth, when Boaz buys land from Naomi's family, he calls together witnesses to see the transaction, so that if there's a later dispute about the land, they can bear witness about what they saw. So that's the basic meaning of the word witness. Now, if we follow this idea throughout the Bible, we learn that God wants a group of witnesses, people who see and experience him to ood or represent him to the world. So beginning with the story of the Exodus, the people of Israel witness Yahweh as the powerful king of the nations when he rescues them from slavery. Then he appoints this one nation to bear witness, or ood, to the rest of the nations about what they experienced. He calls them a kingdom of priests, or people who connect all other nations to Yahweh, the true God and King. But there's a big problem. The Israelites aren't good witnesses. In fact, they start worshiping other gods. So God raises up a chief witness, Moses, to ood or bear witness to the people who are supposed to be their real witnesses. When Moses meets with Yahweh on Mount Sinai, he sees and experiences God face to face. When he comes down, he oods, he bears witness to the people about his experience. He even writes a song as a witness so that they would never forget how God has cared for and rescued them. But as the story goes on, Israel does forget. They fail to truly see God, so they fail as his witnesses. So God raises up prophets who are like Moses to ood, to open their eyes to who their God really is. Like Isaiah. He has a vision of God as the cosmic king, and he's sent to ood to bear witness to the Israel of his day because they're blind, they're corrupt, and they don't recognize God as their king. So Isaiah says that one day God will raise up the ultimate chief witness, a figure called the servant. He will open the eyes of the blind so that they can truly see Yahweh and bear witness to the nations that their God is the king who will rescue the world. And now, when we turn to the story of Jesus, we find him claiming to be that servant and witness spoken of by Isaiah. He's the ultimate witness, or in Greek, the martus. Crowds of people witness him saying that he's bringing God's kingdom, that it's here, right now, through him. They see Jesus healing people, even restoring sight to the blind. Many recognize who he is and respond to his message, but many others still refuse to truly see. Even the nation's leaders won't listen to him. Rather, they kill Jesus for bearing witness to God's kingdom, that is, for being a martus. In fact, this is where the word martyr comes from. But then, after Jesus' death, something amazing happens. Jesus' friends see him alive from the dead, and they recognize that he is the divine king, Yahweh himself, who has come to rescue the world. After that, Jesus sends them out to martyreo, that is, to bear witness to the nations, to open their eyes to this risen king who has conquered death and who offers freedom and rescue and the hope of a new creation. And it's this story about Jesus that's been spread all around the world by faithful witnesses. And to this day, when someone hears the story of Jesus and experiences the love of God for all humanity, the most natural thing to do is to simply bear witness.